Good morning to everybody who's here in this forum or online behind the screens. We just heard that the Green Deal and sustainability, that is something that I've seen multiple times at this fair. Maybe that's also a strong contrast when it comes to the fairs of the past few years, where this topic wasn't as relevant just yet. But you have to say that it's rightfully represented here in one of the key topics, and specifically in the next 5 years or the next decade is going to be very important. Over the next few minutes, I would like to give you an overview of the political context, the European context, namely, and also what kind of impact that is going to have on the window industry in Germany and all the different actors. So I would like to introduce the association as such. So we're going to look into politics and also the regulatory things. So what does the regulatory body want and how is it being applied? So there are some voluntary initiatives and concepts. We're going to talk about those in detail and to see what they're doing and how we are involved. Okay, so talking about EPPA, which is the European Economic Association of Vinyl Window Profiles. So 90% of the production is in our association. They're represented there. And that also means that today about 25,000 employees work for us and 4 billion euros revenue are going to be generated every year. So if we talk about sustainability, overall, we already have a significant amount of vinyl window waste that is recycled and is then going to be reused. So about half of it is going to go back to profile into windows, and the other half is going into other building applications. And that is what we call a controlled cycle and a closed cycle, closed loop. So, talking about the Green Deal as such, paradigm shift, that is a word that you have to be very careful with because not everything that's new is a paradigm shift as such. But I still decided to go with this term just because I would say it's a very basic shift that we're talking about. In 2019, it was agreed upon, and it was only a political proclamation at that point. However, now over the past 3 years, it has definitely developed further and further and has established and manifested in laws. It is very important because if you just look at the building sector and how relevant it is for climate protection and climate neutrality, you can see that 40% of the overall energy consumption in Europe is used for buildings. And if you look at emissions as well, that's a very important factor. 36% of emissions in Europe are based on buildings and come from buildings. That's a comparable high number. And by 2050, the EU now wants to be climate neutral. We have to be climate neutral. And because of that, there are different goals that are connected to that. And you can see those on the left hand side in my overview, and that really affects all different industries, all different actors. It could be the big industry, it could be the end user, really everything. But because of all the individual circles, you can see which ones really affect us directly in our window industry. So it would be, and I just mentioned it there, climate neutrality, and of course, all the goals that go with it. Till 2030 and 2050. 2030 is in 8 years' time, so it's just around the corner. And then we also have zero harmful material goals, which is also something that is important for our supply chain, and we're going to have to achieve that. Energy and resources, and that's how we have to build. We have to save resources, we have to save energy, especially in this context of the energy crisis. It's a very important topic. And it's not only about climate neutrality in general, but it is also about the well being of the individual end users, which is also very important. So that affects us directly as well. And we can't leave anybody behind. That is also very important. We can't forget about that because it is a basic shift that everybody has to be on board. And of course, windows do play a big role here, specifically vinyl windows. And of course, it's not only about the bigger picture and the big goal, but also the system behind it. That's why it's a paradigm shift. So there's a system that has to be behind it in order to be able to reach those goals. Because if you really think about a circular situation, then you have to act like that as well. So you really have to connect recyclers with producers and end users. They all have to have a dialogue, and you really have to set up decision-making processes so that you find solutions together and develop them together so that they don't contradict each other at the end of the day. So it's not only about goals, but it's also about the whole system overall that's behind it. And so the question is, how does it affect us? It affects us in a great way, and I can tell you more about that in just a minute. So sustainability is something that was very often a marketing topic specifically in the past, and also a topic that was always implemented on a voluntary basis. So if you wanted to go that extra mile, you could. If you just wanted to show this extra little bit, you could do that with sustainability. And that time is now gone. Sustainability is mandatory now. It's a must have. It's not something that you can think about whether you want to do it or not. You have to do it now. And there are two sets of rules that really show what that means for us in the future for window builders, for example, or also for those that are in charge of the system. So we do have the eco design for sustainable products regulation, which is very important, and that is currently being developed. And in the past, it used to only be sort of like a framework. It was only called Eco Design Directive. And of course, overall, it's a very logical step when it comes to the ambitious goals that I just mentioned. So you just have to break it down even more for each individual product. And this regulation is going to do that in the future. It's going to be even more important. And the member states really don't have a lot of input in regards to how it's going to be implemented, what it's going to look like. So now for these product groups, for all products in the European market, there are going to be mandatory regulations when it comes to information, but also when it comes to performance. And that means, first and foremost, that there are specific categories. And of course, there's mandatory information. You have to define, okay, what do I want to say about the individual product? There's a rule for CO2 emissions, not only in production, but throughout the whole life cycle. And in order to be able to prove that, you're going to have to be able to check it. So, of course, there are some norms that have to be developed in order to see the performance and really check up on these performances. The biggest part is going to be the digital passport, and the end user can then see directly what the performance is like in the individual areas, and all of that is going to be color coded. So, is it a green product, red product, etc. That holds true for all products, and of course, we also have building products like Windows. The for Windows, which is construction products regulation, and it's basically doing the same thing, but it has a very clear focus, and you can just see all of that via the CE marking that you know. Of course, we already have to do that with every window that we built today. And of course, it's about the same indicators, so it'd be designed for recycling and also life cycle, for example. And in our case, they're going to be for the whole product group window. They're going to be defined for that, considering the industry as well. And then they're going to have to figure out what kind of information the end user needs to know. That is still up for discussion. We know that window is not necessarily something where you go to a store and you pick it out by looking at sort of like a traffic light. It's going to be for the whole building, etc. And that's why the information flow has to be provided differently. So another thing that is very, very important for us, if you really look at the context of these regulations, eco-design guidelines definitely have a lot of speed over the next 5 years or so. Well, I think until 25, so between 20 and 25, within 5 years, it's going to be defined for the first product group. So that's around the corner, and it's going to define key topics. How do you calculate content and ingredients, etc. And overall, that's going to be an important part that's going to be defined, that is going to be important for regulations. And we're talking about until 2045. So it's definitely around the corner as well. But for us, it's very, very important. Lots is really dependent on that, on that eco design regulation. And it's also very important to ensure levels. So maybe in terms of the name, you may have not seen it. So the European evaluation for buildings, that's open source, is accessible to anybody, and step by step, it's going to be in a building certification like DGMB or BREEAM. And that is step by step happening at the moment. And this level is then based on the calculations for the sustainability of the whole building, and it's based on the individual declarations of the product. So that means if you have your environmental performance for a product, if you do that with a product declaration, so BD, for example, then the results of this EBD are going to be in the levels calculation. And this is how the product is going to be evaluated in the building context for the whole life cycle. And other areas that we don't want to talk about in detail, but things that are also going to have an impact on the market are probably taxonomy, for example. That is also something that we heard on the radio, on the news, etc., because of the ratings of the coal energy in taxonomy. And again, the sustainability indicators are going to be determined. They're going to be relevant for windows. So when is a window energy efficient, etc., etc. So levels is also part of the energy performance of the buildings directive EPBD. And again, it's about sustainability in buildings. And if that has to be evaluated, then you use the levels indicators for that. So again, this plays hand in hand. So in theory, that is the plan. All of these listed rules are in development right now, so that means it's not set in stone yet. However, the direction is very, very clear. And in the end, we have the Energy Efficiency Directive, and that is something that was voted on in Parliament this week. And of course, energy efficiency is definitely connected there when it comes to the energy crisis we have in Europe. And again, levels is part order to evaluate the sustainability of buildings. So that was it for the sets of rules, and maybe just a couple of words about the initiatives where we as EPPA are active already. And first and foremost, I would like to just talk about this one because it's the oldest initiative. That's the Vinyl Plus. It's in the third round now. It's called Vinyl Plus 2030, and a lot of things are happening for the PVC value added chain. They're defining different things using three pathways that you see in this picture right here. So it would be climate neutrality, it would be stakeholder dialogue, and then also when it comes to the circular economy overall. For the circular value chain, there are clear goals for that in terms of what needs to be accomplished. And they didn't do that by themselves in a back room, but they did it bottom up. So they involved the different industries, but also external environmental organizations in order to just define how we have to change and where we need to go in order to make PVC more sustainable and also keep them in the circular economy. So everything that we see in the market now at the end of their life cycle is going to have to be a new PVC product. And we are included here when it comes to defining the goals. So just the new program, but we're also represented in the working groups, and we just include our knowledge that we have from the window profile industry because we have been acting here in the past. So we've been recycling for a long time. Another important initiative is the Circular Plastics Alliance. And that is something we know from associations and companies. They can sign them directly. And we have more than 300 organizations that have already signed. And they actually voluntarily agreed to goals on a voluntary basis. So that was the new plastic strategy. And that is also part of the new Green Deal. And they have the ambitious goal of saving 10 million tons of recycled plastic every year. And again, we're organized, and I think you can see it right here, based on the different sectors. So that would be organizational degree based on automotive, building and construction. We're also represented here, agriculture, packaging, which is very important, and then also electronics. And based on the four different target areas, that would be recycled content, it would be sorted plastic waste, waste streams, and then also design for recycling, which is also a big part of it. And then also when it comes to research and development. So that's how it's organized. And it's also very important. You can see that on top here, monitoring. So, of course, we have to monitor our progress for the very first time. We are able to do that. We have a monitoring system on a European level where we can figure out, okay, what is going to be waste? Where is the waste going? So who's recycling it and where is this material going to be used? And that is something that we do across all 27, even though Great Britain was still a part, so it was 28 countries that participated in Europe. And we also have some work when it comes to monitoring that we did that was part of the PVC industry because we had Gecko Vinyl, and they already had the existing data collection system. And in Germany, that is very much used for windows. We collect the data when it comes to window recycling, and this is the expertise we're able to use. So we were just able to do more and support the other polymers who weren't at that point yet. It's also very important to have design for recycling. So Mr. Klein was going to tell us more about that later. There's a separate guideline that we have developed, and of course, that was also agreed upon, and that is now being changed into a norm. Last but not least, if you just look at industry initiatives, of course, we also just want to say what we're doing ourselves. And for us, I have to say sustainability has been a topic for a long time, even before the Green Deal even existed. And for us, it is mainly important when it comes to saving resources. It's very much essential. So that means that we are using different things. 1 kilo recyclate, for example, is saving 2 kilos of CO2 in production. And with that, it is definitely something that you prefer over new material. And of course, we have great potential when it comes to that. So if you look at this line right here, logically, if you look at the vinyl market in the past for windows and window profiles specifically, you can see over the past decades, we know that there is more and more vinyl windows which are going to become old windows, and with that, they could be a potential resource, at least in window production. The big benefit would be that you then have the recycled window that you can use for a new window. So today it's already 25%, so 25% of the material that is needed in the vinyl profile industry is from recyclate. And just a few weeks ago, we decided to do that because we were faster than we thought. We decided that our goal needs to be expanded. So we said by 2030, we want to have the half amount of the windows that are going to be old windows are going to be recycled. It doesn't mean that we don't want to recycle more, but a window has to be recycled anyway. So there are big investments behind it when it comes to collecting them, etc. And all of the recyclates that available is then going to be turned into new windows. And that would mean that 50% of the material that is being used can be done with that. I just said that it's not gonna be flying to the recycling station. That's why it's one of the operative projects that we have. So old window recycling is what we want to support by actually collecting old windows, and I just mentioned it in Germany for many, many years. It's been actively established. We're definitely extending a project in France and in Poland by offering specific solution. So we are going to do that with people who are taking out windows. We can just, okay, this is a valuable window, bring it back into the recycling circle. And of course, you need to just explain a lot, use a lot of knowledge, and build up that network. On the one hand, we are going to be supported by Vinyl Plus, but we also need support from the regulatory body, specifically considering the regulations that we looked at earlier. It has to be very clear that window recycling is a very important part of these goals that need to be accomplished. And for that, we just need certain laws because there can't be any materials burned, etc. So, of course, we definitely count on the support of politicians, and that would be the Green Deal in real life. And with that, this is my final slide already. And again, just to summarize, and you can just look at everything that we already talked about. So, sustainability is not optional anymore, it is a must have and definitely a condition in order to be successful in the European market in the future. You can definitely say that. In 2019, the Green Deal was approved. Now we can start feeling it, and it's going to continue like that step by step. Lots of laws are being agreed upon this year and also next year. And by 2025, we're going to have to know that framework conditions are changing. Of course, we don't have to be scared of that because we have seen that we're very active. We've been doing this for a long time, and we definitely also deliver. And we do think that this is going to be very, very good for other industries as well. So that was my final slide. With that, I'd like to say thank you, and I am happy to take your questions. Thank you.